With us now for his take on this latest dust-up between the President and the Speaker of the House is Cedric Herring, a professor in the Sociology Department at the University of Illinois at Chicago and in the Institute of Government and Public Affairs. Professor, thank you for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
You heard Lynn say that in the scheme of things, this particular incident isn't a big deal, but by any measure, the President has had a tough summer on many different fronts. What's your thought on what's happened here?
I agree with what Lynn said, that in the long run, this will not be viewed as something that is substantial, but it is a continuation of the symbolism, the symbolic issues where President Obama has had great difficulty gaining traction, trying to move forward with his agenda. And what you actually have is a Republican Congress that is strategic in the sense that it has come to the conclusion that anytime that it agrees with President Obama, it loses points in the political polls, and especially the far right wing, the Tea Party caucus of the Republican Party, is basically saying the best way for us to gain is by making him lose and embarrassing him at every turn and doing whatever we can to be oppositional. And so the symbolism probably will continue. And so this issue that is a minor flap right now is just that. But it is, in fact, symptomatic of other issues. We saw the big one being the great debate about the debt. And basically, the appearance that there were people in Congress who were willing for the economy to go over a cliff to prove that they could tell the president what to do.
Do you believe that this was part of the strategy to make the president look bad on the part of Republicans or even the Tea Party, or was it just a miscommunication that got out of hand?
This is what I actually think, and I have no empirical evidence to substantiate this, but it is likely, just like you had an apparent agreement between Speaker of the House Boehner and President Obama with respect to the debt deal. They seemed as if they were so close to coming to a grand compromise, a grand deal, etc. But members of the Republican caucus, especially the Tea Party, told Boehner they were not going to sign off. And it was Boehner who was then captive and in a straitjacket and could not maneuver and realized this. And so it put him in a very awkward position, which in turn put President Obama in a very awkward position. And so it's not just Obama who is embarrassed by this situation, it is also Boehner, because in some sense it is he who is also captive of the Tea Party caucus.
And why do you believe that is? Because the Tea Party caucus is still a relatively small, although vocal, very vocal group. Why are they pushing the agenda that Speaker Boehner is succumbing to?
Well, you had Minority Leader of the Senate saying that he would not agree with anything that President Obama was pushing. And you have newly elected members of the Republican part of the House of Representatives who came in by saying that their agenda was to cut spending. Nobody calls it austerity, but to talk in terms of austerity and to give corporate giveaways and things along those lines. And so that is still their agenda. And they got elected on running on that platform, and they believe that it's in their best interest, not necessarily. Now, they also believe that it's in the national interest, so don't get me wrong with that. But it is clear to them that they mobilize their base by doing those kinds of things and being as oppositional as they can be. That's not what benefits the nation necessarily, and it's definitely not what benefits President Obama.
Does the president have options here, do you believe? Does he have room to push back, or does he have to compromise?
Well, I think that's what's disappointing so many supporters of President Obama, is that the notion that he is so ready to compromise, and I think there are a great number of people who are ready to see him take off the gloves. But that's not how he ran for office. He always talked about how he would try to mediate and try to bring people together, people who didn't work together, and talked about how Washington was dysfunctional. And so he said he would be the change to try to bring opposing sides together. Now, sometimes it might not be possible to bring sides together when one side says, well, we win whenever we don't come together. And that's kind of what we have.
And he's disappointed a number, as you said, in his base, including the Congressional Black Caucus, that have blasted him, especially on his job creation initiatives. We'll hear what plans he has next week, right, Thursday at 7. But is that impacting his capital, his political capital, that even the Congressional Black Caucus has come out to criticize him?
You actually have two Obamas. And let's be clear about this. You have President Obama, who governed and pushed through what people said was an impossibility with health care reform. You had President Obama, who got credit card reform. You had President Obama, who changed Don't Ask, Don't Tell, who changed a number of legislative planks and pushed these things through against what people thought were impossible odds. Then you had the midterm elections, and you had basically wiping out the Democratic portion of the Congress. But perhaps even more substantial than that was you had the Tea Party caucus within the Republican Party that pulled things so much to the right and made it even difficult for those moderate or even, let's call, conservative Republicans.
You say that it's not in President Obama's style to take off the gloves. What do you believe is going to happen in this coming year as the election cycle heats up?
This is what's ironic, is that because the economy is so bad, and it's not just in the U.S., but it is international. You see programs being slashed in Great Britain, throughout Europe, and I suspect that that will also happen in the U.S. And what President Obama will do is go along with cuts. Now, we had the great debate about the debt and which programs would be cut, and we still have the large committee that's supposed to make these cuts and things along those lines. But there will be cuts.
Quickly, do you see him regaining any steam in the year to come, or is it going to be more pushback from the Republican Congress?
Well, I think he has a mind on the general election in 2012, and for him to win, not only does he need his base, but he has to have voters who are in the middle.
Do you see that happening?
That's what he's trying to do, I believe.
Professor Cedric Herring, thank you very much for being with us tonight.
My pleasure.